Part 233. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2325. Bai Shan also regretted that Ji Yan was not here. He and Man Bao said, if we have someone like Ji Yan in our hands, we can do even more things. Some people don't need to be very smart, as long as the force value is high enough. In the hands of those who know how to use it, it is a weapon of magic. Man Bao asked, are you going to use Jin Kuyan? He has rebellion and is not on good terms with us. What if he rebels halfway? It's too dangerous. Bai Shandao, the risk is high, but he is really easy to use. Doesn't he want to unravel the burning treasure? It can be seen that he is a lover of money. I can hang him with gold and silver objects first. This is not difficult, General Guo has so many good things. Bai Shan doesn't feel heartbroken when he uses the other party's things. Bai Shan turned his head to look at her and said softly, the letter has been sent to the royal city. General Li can't find anyone suitable to enter the city. I may have to go in there. General Ashina took away most of the people, including the civil servants who were arrogant. Because he thought that the king's city had been captured, General Guo only needed to clean up the mess and defend the king's city at the back. Just take the city back. King Kaiosai can defend the city for 40 days, and General Guo is better at defending the city, and he will definitely be able to defend it longer than him. Who would have thought that General Guo would lose the city before the mess was sorted out? So at that time, General Ashina left behind the defenders and tools, and left with the rest. Man Bao has not just treated people for the past 2 days. She occasionally talked to the wounded soldiers and knew the truth. She didn't stop Bai Shan, she only said, you have to take care. Bai Shan nodded. After Man Bao finished speaking, he felt that such a sentence was not good, so he asked, do you want me to accompany you? Bai Shan immediately said, if the medical bills can go away, it is naturally the best for us to go together. Man Bao, I thought you would persuade me that it was too dangerous not to go. Bai Shan smiled and said, I didn't intend to invite you together, but if I add Jin Kuyan, I will be more sure. He said, and you have Uncle Joe by your side? If you go together, the plan will only be smoother. Man Bao also felt that it was better for him to go, because Keek was very useful in wars. How do I get to? Bai Shan pondered, pretend to be a soldier. She obviously can't use her own identity to go. An imperial doctor went to Wangcheng to be the messenger of peace talks? I'm afraid that King Kaiosai didn't doubt it at first, but now he will doubt it. But Bai Shan rolled his eyes, and another thought came to his mind, it's not impossible, just say you went to the city to ask for medicine. What medicine do you want? Bai Shan smiled and said, General Guo surrendered to Kaiosai. There must always be an excuse. Originally, I thought about the crime of losing the city, but now that I think about it, there is a better reason than the crime of losing the city. Man Bao, ask for medicine. Bai Shan nodded, you think about the good medicine for wounds in Kaiosai city. After entering, you will ask for medicine, and you will say that it is for General Guo. Man Bao pondered, I think the best medicine for wounding is Panax Noto Ginseng, but the position of General Guo's arrows is not good, but we can ask them for some precious medicinal materials for qi and life protection. Should have. Such as ginseng or something, it is a holy product for qi. Bai Shan urged her, hurry up and write down the list. Write down what is precious. You are not afraid that they will not have it? As long as they believe that we want something and are eager to ask for something, it will be fine. Man Bao ran back to write the list. The person who sent the letter into the city brought back the news that King Kaiosai was willing to meet General Guo's envoy, but there were not many people allowed to bring them in, at most 20. At the same time, more and more people were sent to watch them in Wangcheng, but because of the checkpoint, they couldn't get close to them, so they couldn't find out the news in the camp. But they walked around the camp, and when they came back, they told King Kyosai, they suffered heavy casualties, the camp smelled of medicine, and when I climbed high, there were many wounded soldiers lying in the open space of the camp, and they couldn't even fit their tents. He added, there is a bloody smell in the lower reaches of the river, all of which flowed down from the upper reaches. Obviously, many people were seriously injured. The king of Kyosai was overjoyed, and the Western Turks on the side rolled their eyes and suggested that the king of Kyosai send troops and kill them directly. King Kyosai looked at his spies and laughed with the Turkic general, since they are willing to submit to this king, why not give them a chance? There is no rush. He turned his back and asked a spy to come over to speak, and asked, the person who came to deliver the letter of begging for peace really said that as long as I agree, Guo Xiao will return the things he robbed from the palace. The spy said, it is said that he will return the things he has in his hands, but he has to ask the king for something. King Kyosai sneered, it's nothing more than a high-ranking official and a rich salary. As long as he is loyal, this king will return to him. The Western Turks took action, not to mention that they would ask them for food, grass, gold, and silver. When they attacked Guo Xiao's camp, whether the gold and silver jewelry stolen by Guo Xiao would go back to their palace or go into the pockets of the Western Turks is uncertain. Therefore, King Kyosai did not want to use Western Turks. Especially in the past 2 days, they were aggressive, causing trouble in the city every day. Not only ordinary people, but even those confident officials under him were quite dissatisfied. King Kyosai said, send a message to them and ask them to send envoys to discuss with them tomorrow. If he meant something, he said, this king wants to see their sincerity. The spies responded and passed the news to the Jin camp. In the camp, Man Bao was directing the wounded soldiers to get out of the tent to bask in the sun. It is cold in the morning and evening, and there is a little sun at noon. Some soldiers with minor injuries can go out to bask in the sun, which is more conducive to physical and mental health. After receiving the news from King Kyosai, General Li turned around in a hurry, looking for them and said, there is no news about the army, if they enter the city tomorrow, I am afraid that the strategy will not work. By Shandao, this is the 4th day. No surprises, they should catch up with the army. We will try to delay the time when we enter the city. Once the army arrives, we will attack the city immediately. At that time, we should cooperate inside and outside. But how can we pass the news to you? General Li said, the Zhoucheng family who advocated opening the city gate for us have all been imprisoned, and our staff in the city can't be contacted at all. It's possible for Bai Shan and the others to contact them after they go in, but they still can't contact the outside world, so if you can't get the news from the outside, how should you cooperate with the outside world? Bai Shan smiled slightly and said, you don't need to worry about General Li, we have our own way to get news from outside. Just one point, after the army arrives, you must put up a flag in the camp. Although Man Bao didn't say it clearly, he knew from a few words that if Uncle Joe appeared in this world now, he could only leave her 80 miles away. Kyosai city is not small. If they are on the other side of the city gate, they can only get news from the camp here at most, and they may not be able to go further. Bai Shan discussed this matter with General Li in detail. The two sides considered various situations. In the end, General Li had 2 boxes of treasures brought up. They were all shiny gold, silver, and jewelry, which were very valuable at first sight. This is the sincerity brought by Bai Shan. 5 degrees today, my God, I can't wait to grow in bed. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2326. General Li generously asked the soldiers to immediately carry the box to Bai Shan's camp, apparently wanting him to choose and stay if he wanted anything he liked before going out. As expected of General Guo's confidant generals, they are in the same line on this point. Obviously, he also felt that this mission was very dangerous. Since there was danger, he naturally had to give something to calm people's hearts. Bai Shan didn't move these things, but he still opened it to let Bai Erlang and the others gain a lot of insight. Bai Erlang opened a box of pearls and sighed, although the country of Kuka is small, it is also very rich. Bai Shan nodded. These things were specially selected, but they weren't the best ones. The best ones were naturally kept to whet your appetite. Bai Shan closed the box and said to Bai Erlang, I and Manbao go in, and I will leave it to you outside. Bai Erlang patted his chest and said, Don't worry, if the army arrives, I will urge them to come to the city to save you. If General AncientChina doesn't go, I will roll around in front of the army, and Lu Huan, I will let him give Lu Huan Shang write a letter. It can be a little more difficult to prepare the next batch of food and grass. Bai Shan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. General AncientChina is not that kind of person. I asked you to stay in case the army is late. I'm afraid there will be a real idea of surrendering to the enemy at the barracks. Bai Erlang, not really. Bai Shan reached out and patted his shoulder. Bai Erlang suddenly felt that his shoulders were so heavy. What should he do? He also wanted to go into the city. Anyway, the sky collapsed inside and there was a tall man supporting him. Daji and Nikanjun followed them in. What General Li did not expect was that Bai Shan not only ordered Jing Kuyan to follow, but also ordered Urge to follow. Except for the two of them, the rest are all warriors in the army. They were personally selected by General Li and General Meng. The two said, they are definitely loyal and righteous. Only then did Bai Shan breathe a sigh of relief. Except for Jing Kuyan and Ergo, everyone else can entrust their backs. However, Bai Shan did not show this disbelief. Instead, he showed great confidence in Jing Kuyan and Ergo, especially for Jing Kuyan. He said to the soldiers, let General Jin tell you about the battle. Jing Kuyan is only a general flag in the army now, and this is because he fought bravely. General Guo felt that it was a pity to let him be a soldier, so he was promoted exceptionally. When he was promoted, he also made it clear that Jing Kuyan was to commit crimes and make meritorious deeds. Everyone secretly rumored that he might be promoted to a side general this year. Only General Li and his confidants knew that General Guo only intended to make Jing Kuyan commit crimes and make meritorious deeds in the position of the general flag. But the soldiers didn't know it, not even Jing Kuyan himself, so Bai Shan kept shouting at General Jin, he acquiesced, and the soldiers followed suit. Anyway, it's just a title. Bai Shan is not a member of the army yet. Even if he is called wrong, he can't ask him about his guilt when he returns to the general. The 2 boxes of gold and silver jewelry were carried to the car and tied up. Manbao changed clothes and got on the horse with Bai Shan. She turned to Zhou Liru and said, everyone's injuries have stabilized these days, you follow the recipe. Just treat them, and if you don't understand, ask a military doctor. Zhou Li responded as follows. Manbao and Bai Shan left together. 20 people, 18 horses, 1 car, and after passing 3 checkpoints, they arrived at the Wangcheng. Wangcheng opened a small door to let them in. Bai Erlang watched them go in from a distance, and then he beat the horse to go back. He asked General Meng, is it necessary to boost morale when I go back? General Meng said, Bai Shan said that he is not in a hurry today and will boost his morale tomorrow. He said, otherwise, it will take a long time for the soldiers to think more, which will remind them of homesickness, and it will not be good for the soldiers to change their hearts. Bai Erlang held the reins tightly and asked, will the army arrive tomorrow? General Meng said, if there is no accident. Bai Erlang temporarily pressed his anxious heart. There were people waiting in the Wangcheng early in the morning. As soon as Bai Shan and the others came in, they were surrounded by a group of swords and spears. Bai Shan smiled slightly, turned back and clapped his hands, and the 2 drivers in the car opened the 2 boxes on the car, and let the Kyosai people see the gifts they brought. Not to mention the soldiers surrounding them, Even the officials who came to receive them were stunned by the gold and silver jewelry inside. Bai Shan asked with a smile, "I wonder if our sincerity, the king, is still satisfied." The official saw the green eyes of the Turkic soldiers mixed in the crowd, and couldn't help his face change. He quickly asked Bai Shan and the others to close the boxes. "Remove the sword." Bai Shan said, "Don't worry, it's the three of us who meet the king. We will never bring weapons in. As for my guards, they probably won't be able to take off their swords." The official frowned. Bai Shan had already pointed to them and said with a smile, "There are only 20 of us, and the three of us are even more powerless. This is in the king's city. What are the king and his lord worried about?" Only then did the officials carefully look at Bai Shan and Zhou Manjuge beside him. Except for Erji, the two of them really didn't look like people with a high level of force, especially Zhou Man, who was actually a girl. The official frowned and asked, "Who is she? Your messenger even has a woman." Bai Shan sighed and said, "This is the imperial doctor of my dynasty. He was originally ordered to come to the western regions to ask for a prescription. Who knew that he was drafted into the army, and now he can't go back if he wants to." He explained, "The general is seriously injured and urgently needs good medicine to save her life. She was ordered to ask for medicine, and even though she surrendered, our general also asked for something." The official was slightly surprised, but this was beyond his expectations, so he didn't bother about the weapons anymore, mainly because the Turks had been watching from a distance, and they looked at it, they couldn't talk too much. So the officials took them to the palace. Of course, only the three of them and the two big boxes could go in, and the rest were left at the gate of Wangcheng, led by Jing Kuyan and Nikan Jun. The official left the three people in the side hall and went to report to the king first. King Kaiosai was surprised, "Ask for medicine?" "Yes, your majesty, have you forgotten? Guo Xiao was hit by a stray arrow that day, and we thought he would definitely die. Who knows that there has been no news, and their military morale is also stable. On the third day, an envoy came to ask for peace." The king suddenly realized, no wonder Guo Xiao asked for peace, it turned out to be to save his life. The officials nodded again and again. "What are the identities of those three messengers?" "The one at the head doesn't know, but he seems to be a civil official. This kind of thing really requires them to come forward. It is estimated that he used to be a clerk in the military. One is an imperial physician, and the other looks like a Turk. It's a vassal commander. Then be careful, the emperor of the Central Plains was not afraid of employing people. He defeated as many people as he had, and he used all those who surrendered. Therefore, there were many generals under his command, and those generals were very powerful, some like Ashina. Famous, and naturally unknown. See you at 9. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2327. The official responded and was about to speak again when a small official trotted in and said, "Your Majesty, General Puli is here." Before saying a word, the general of the Western Turks stepped forward and said with a laugh, "I heard that the distinguished guests of the king are here, won't the king let us meet?" Unpleasant flashed in King Kaiosai's eyes, but a smile appeared on his face. "General Puli is here, please take your seat." General Puli took his seat directly. When Bai Shan and the others came in with the two big boxes, they saw a person sitting under the throne. After a pause, Bai Shan only saluted at the throne. King Kaiosai was curious about General Guo's injury, so he asked Zhou Man. Man Bao didn't dare to say too much, otherwise he felt that General Guo was going to die, so what should he do if he directly sent troops to attack the camp? He didn't dare to say too lightly, what if he didn't believe it and suspected that they would detain them directly? So Manbao dropped his book bag on the ground, so he must not understand it, and finally told him the consequences. If it can't be treated in time, it will be better now, and it will be a hindrance to life expectancy. King Kyosai didn't understand what he said before, but he understood the sentence. He was refreshed and asked, "What medicine does Guo Xiao ask for?" Manbao presented the list of medicines he had written in the morning, all of which were good herbs for nourishing blood and qi, and ginseng was the top one. There was only one box of this thing in the palace of Kyosai, and it was bought with a lot of money from merchants in the central plains. King Kyosai didn't take many things in the warehouse when he escaped, but he didn't forget this box of ginseng. Of course he couldn't. To Guo Xiao. However, King Kyosai would not say it. It can only mean that many medicinal materials are not available in the palace. After all, the palace has been looted, but he will mention it to the ministers to see where there are in the city, and they can buy them at that time. Bai Shan took the opportunity to say, "Your Majesty's kindness to let us buy medicinal herbs is already benevolence and righteousness, how dare we let the king spend more money?" King Kyosai's gaze couldn't help but fall on the two boxes. Bai Shan immediately said that they didn't use the gold and silver to buy them, and even without the spoils of war this time, General Guo still had some savings. The smile on King Kyosai's face was real. So the topic got to the point. King Kyosai mentioned when they would enter the city to surrender, and Bai Shan said that he would lead the surrendering army in when he bought the medicine and went back to General Guo to take it. Bai Shan also raised the issue of General Guo's future treatment. Ba Li, who had been sitting on the side in silence, suddenly sneered and said, "The defeated general, it is a blessing for the king to accept his surrender, and he dares to ask for an official position." Bai Shan looked at King Kyosai with an embarrassed expression. King Kyosai smiled and said to Ba Li, "General Ba Li, Guo Xiao is still somewhat capable. If he is willing to surrender, we can still take the position of Kyosai as a general. Your Majesty believes in them like that?" The Han people have always been cunning, and this may be their tactic to slow down their troops. Ba Li said to King Kyosai in Turkic dialect, "If you want me to say, it's better to bring the army to pacify them, and then surrender the army and become prisoners. Wouldn't you listen to the king's words more?" Bai Shan and Manbao could understand without Ergo's translation. The two frowned slightly and did not hide that they understood. They quickly said to King Kyosai, who was not very proficient in Turkic language, "Please keep your promise." He said to Ba Li again, "This general, although our General Guo is injured, we are resourceful and have strong generals under our command. We have 3,000 troops. I'm afraid it will not be easy for you to attack my camp directly, right?" Bai Shan said tit for tat, "Otherwise, why did the king and the general have to wait for so many days and not pursue the victory on the second day when our general was injured? This has hit the sore spot of King Kyosai. Why didn't they pursue the victory? It's not because Ba Li feels that the money is not in place, so no matter how many times he mentions it, the other party turns a deaf ear and finds various excuses to say no. Now that I know that Guo Xiao has a lot of gold and silver treasures in his hands, he wants to fight again, but if he goes, where will he still have his share of those things? You must know that most of the spoils in Guo Xiao's hands were looted from the palace. Ba Li wanted to take away the things from his palace in Kyosai. How could there be such a reason? So King Kyosai was more determined to accept Guo Xiao's surrender. He quickly appeased Bai Shan and Ba Li, saying that Guo Xiao also obeyed the emperor of the Central Plains, and the war between them had nothing to do with Guo Xiao himself, so the past grievances are right off, everyone will be friends from now on. Ba Li's cheeks twitched, and finally he held back his breath, barely chatting with King Kyosai, and then left. King Kyosai looked at the time and found that it was getting late, so he asked Bai Shan and the others to stay for dinner. Tonight they would stay at the inn outside the palace, and they could go out of the city to discuss with Guo Xiao the next day after taking the necessary medicinal materials. Surrender. At that time, Wang Cheng will send an envoy to discuss with Guo Xiao on specific matters. How dare the king of Kaosai let Guo Xiao, who claims to have 3,000 troops, enter the city directly? Naturally, all the soldiers put down their weapons and took off their armor before entering the city to accept the surrender. Bai Shan responded with a smile, and then went out of the palace with Man Bao. The officials sent to receive them took them to the inn, while euphemistically said that Kaosai is not in the central plains, and the medicinal materials were incomplete, and some of the medicinal materials they were looking for might not be found. Man Bao expressed his understanding and said that as long as he could buy half of General Guo, he would be very satisfied. The two sides reached a consensus, and everyone was very happy. The official said that tomorrow he would personally bring people and medicinal materials to see them. When the people left, Bai Shan motioned for Daji to close the door, and then said to Jing Kuyan, "They still can't trust us, and obviously they don't plan to let us contact other people." Jing Kuyan asked, "What should we do then?" Urge asked, "Is there any other way for young Master Bai to contact the people in the city?" Bai Shandao, "I'll try my best, you don't have to worry, just look at my gestures tomorrow and act." Jing Kuyan always felt that they were yellow-haired boys who were unreliable, but Ergo believed them very much. Bai Shan refused to let them intervene. Bai Shan and Man Bao looked at each other and didn't speak. As dusk approached, Bai Shan and Man Bao tried to go out of the inn and were stopped. The official who guarded them said, "The war has just passed through the city, and it is still very chaotic now. The two adults look like they are from the Central Plains. Unlike us, if you go to the street, you may have an accident. For the safety of the adults, you better not go out." Bai Shan said regretfully, "I wanted to take this opportunity to buy something, but since it's inconvenient, I'll have to wait and take a good look at Kaosai City in the future." The group was confined in the inn, and Man Bao kept keeping Keek's attention on the situation over the camp. But because the distance is a little far, although it is still within the scanning range of Keek, many detailed things cannot be known in time. It stared at the open space and the door of the camp, and when it saw two horses running in quickly and being caught, it followed. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2328. The two commanders jumped off their horses and immediately ran to General Li to report. The chief commander has divided his troops into two routes. One way is to cut off the road of the Western Turks, and the other way is to return to the king city of Kaosai, and we can arrive early tomorrow morning. Keek related to Man Bao. Man Bao breathed a sigh of relief and ran to find Bai Shan. Bai Shan Zhen was standing at the window looking at the street below. Hearing the movement, he turned to look at her. He smiled slightly and asked, "Is there any news?" Man Bao nodded fiercely, squinting at him. Bai Shan knew, he also smiled slightly. Without asking for specific information, he reached out to her. Man Bao put his hand on his, and the two looked side by side at the street below the station. Although the war has just been experienced, the streets have become lively again now, and there are many small stalls selling various foods under the inn. It's a pity they can't go out, otherwise it would be nice to have a taste. There may be another war here tomorrow. Early the next morning, officials from Kaosai brought several medicinal herb merchants to see Zhou Man. They brought some medicinal herbs, some of which were listed on Man Bao's list, and some other medicinal herbs. As soon as they came in, the official glanced at the servant who was serving in the inn calmly, and after seeing him shaking his head slightly, he knew that Bai Shan and the others were honest last night and didn't do anything superfluous. The official smiled and introduced the herbalists he brought to Zhou Man, and then stood by to watch them identify the herbs and bargain. What Man Bao wanted were all good medicines for nourishing blood and qi. Basically, she asked for these kinds of medicinal herbs brought by the herbalists, and she also paid back the price. As for other medicines, Man Bao thought about the medicinal herbs in the camp. "I picked up some and bought some, and at the same time proposed that I wanted to see some other medicinal materials. With such a choice and a counter-offer, the group stayed until noon. Keek said, the army set up an ambush at another city gate, and General Meng came to the city gate with the soldiers and horses in your tent. It was about to be attacked. Man Bao lowered his eyes, picked out 2 from a pile of medicinal herbs, placed one in the west and one in the north on the table, and asked Bai Shan with a smile, this is Beiji and agrimony for hemostasis. I remember that we have agrimony in our army, but there are not many. Do you think I want to buy more agrimony, or buy some white sage? Bai Shan lowered his eyes and looked at the positions of the 2 medicinal herbs on the table, then said after a pause, agrimony serrata is good, but since we have it in the army, let's buy some white chili. Man Bao nodded, turned his head and said to the medicinal herbs who can provide Beiji, give us a load. Bai Shan took out the purse, poured out a piece of gold from it, and asked the merchants to split the account and then give him the rest. When the merchants saw this piece of gold, they wanted to recommend some other medicines, and they spent more than half of it, so they just spent all the gold, and what was the matter with looking for money? Bai Shan and the official smiled and said, now your medicinal materials are too expensive. When the general enters the city, please ask the king to let the soldiers in the army buy some cheap medicinal materials. In the last battle, many soldiers in our army were injured. They recaptured the king's city in the last battle at the city gate. This was a proud battle of Kyosai, so the official was very proud, smiled and said, when General Guo comes in, the king will give him preferential treatment. After Bai Shan glanced at Man Bao, he smiled and said, that being the case, even if it's for the generals and men in the army, we should hurry back and finish this matter. Bai Shan took the opportunity to bid farewell to the officials, and proposed to leave from the west gate. He explained, you also know that many soldiers in the army are the source of soldiers in the central plains, and they all want to return to their hometowns, so General Guo's move was only discussed with several generals in the army, in order to avoid the army chaos. When you send troops to formally receive it, it is not appropriate to publicize this matter. The day we came here, General Guo changed the people on the checkpoint and found other excuses to leave the camp. At this time, it's not good to go out through the north gate, otherwise the soldiers guarding the checkpoint will not be able to explain it. The official frowned slightly, but I'm going to accompany you back to the camp to see General Guo. Do I have to be secretive? Bai Shan hurriedly said, not so much, as long as the messenger puts on Han Chinese clothes, then you can follow us directly into the camp to meet General Guo. As long as we have discussed the subject of surrender, we will find an opportunity to gather the soldiers' weapons. Bring them back. Then the king's army can take over directly. Even if there are a few soldiers who don't obey orders, they can quickly take them. The other party saw that Bai Shan was thoughtful and reasonable, so he thought about it and nodded, but it's a bit far to go out of the city from the west city gate and then walk back to the north city. Bai Shan smiled and said, although it's far away, we're going out of the city now, speed up the road, and we can get there before sunset, and at that time the army was having meals and it was getting dark again, so fewer people noticed us. The official couldn't help but smile and said, Master Bai is really thoughtful, I even thought about this. It is suspected that they planned this road and reason early in the morning. Bai Shan smiled embarrassedly at him, it's a secret, it's always good to be careful. The officials had no opinion, but the matter was reported to the king. The soldiers quickly went to report back, and King Kyosai agreed. When Bai Shan and the others drove a car to the west city gate, General Ba Li rode on his horse and looked at them from a distance. He sneered, turned his head and said to his confidant, King Kyosai has no blood, and was killed by Guo Xiao. After so many days of siege, as soon as the opponent dropped, he took it. General, shall we go back? No, he said, the food and gold and silver that Kyosai promised us has not been enough. Since he doesn't want us to send troops, he will leave after giving us the food, gold, and silver that he promised. What if they never give it? Ba sneered, if he doesn't give it to us, he will take it himself. As he said that, he glanced at the stalls on the street and the shops behind him. Man Bao rode beside Bai Shan on horseback. Keek said, your camp has raised the banner you mentioned. Man Bao looked at Bai Shan and said, I want to eat the pie in the tent. Urge, who was riding not far away, couldn't help but look up at her. This was negotiated before leaving the camp. Once Zhou Man said this, the army would return to attack the city in a quarter of an hour. He couldn't help but turned around and found nothing unusual, but it seemed that there were abnormalities everywhere. So where did Zhou Man get the information from? No matter where it came from, the back of the person who heard the sentence froze, sat up slightly, and seemed to continue to walk forward without any abnormality, but from time to time, his hand touched the handle of the knife, confirming that his knife was hanging on his waist. Only Bai Shan smiled back to her, eat when you go back. The two stopped talking, but looked at the West City gate in the distance, but the two slowed down the speed, which invisibly slowed the team down, and Man Bao pointed to the cake on a booth and said, although you can eat it when you go back, but I still want to try the patties from Kuka. The officials from Kyosai, who came to see them off, and also accompanied them to the camp, met them, and generously bought them two to taste. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2329. Bai Shan and Man Bao slowly finished eating the meatloaf, took out the water bag and took a sip of water, carefully wiped their fingers with a handkerchief, and then continued towards the West City gate. Arriving at the Zikan gate, Bai Shan raised his head and glanced at the soldiers upstairs at the city gate, and then at the private guards in front of the gate, turned his head and smiled at the officials of Kyosai. The defense on this side of the Zikan gate seems to be. It's less than the north gate. Nonsense, you are all outside the north city gate, of course, there should be tighter defense there. It is also possible that the Nanchinj gate, where the Dajin army returned to aid, was the most closely guarded. Bai Shan smiled and calculated the time in his heart. Just when he felt that it was almost the same time, the officials of Kyosai had already let people open the small door and were about to send them out of the city. Shouted, enemy attack, enemy attack. The person who had just opened the small door heard that he was about to close the small door. With a wave of Bai Shan's hand, the soldiers and guards who had been prepared immediately pulled out their scabbards and slashed at the Kyosai soldiers next to them. Jin Kuyan was the quickest, and he waved it almost as soon as Bai Shan's hand. The moment the Kyosai official raised his head, he drew his knife. Before he could lift his head to look at the tower, he was chopped off with a knife and fell to the ground. 2 laps. The man stood beside Bai Shan, and blood splattered all over Bai Shan. He didn't change his face, and pointed at the door, rush out. The 17 people he brought were all the best in the front line. They were originally in the forward camp. Hearing the words, they rushed forward even more bravely. Only Deji stayed by Bai Shan and Zhou Man's side and didn't move. Jin Kuyan took the lead, and a knife stopped the Kyosa soldiers who were rushing up. The soldiers behind him quickly filled the gap, and then rushed out. Bai Shan took Man Bao and followed them closely, and rushed under the city gate. The bow and arrow were blocked from sight and could not hit them at all. Finally a Kyosai soldier reacted and shouted, protect the gate, protect the gate. Bai Shan quickly grabbed a knife from the hand of a downed Kyosai soldier, and dragged Man Bao forward while holding it. Together with them, he blocked the Kyosai soldiers who were constantly descending from the city tower to support him. Man Bao felt that he was at a disadvantage with a knife, so he gave up the knife on the ground, until Bai Shan grabbed a long spear that was stabbed, and Daji next to him immediately slashed at the soldier, and then kicked the man out. Bai Shan grabbed the long gun and gave it to Man Bao. Man Bao held it with both hands, and after turning a half circle, he found the feeling, and then stared at the empty gun behind Bai Shan with a blank face. Ergo had been instructed early in the morning. As long as there was a fight, he would lead his team to rush to open the door and leave the rest of the business. At this time, they rushed to the door under the cover of everyone, and after cutting off all the guards, they were thrown away. With the sword, the three of them tried to push the door latch together, and Bai Shan and the others were also forced to close the space by the Kyosai soldiers who came to help. Jin Kuyan guarded one corner alone, and almost no one could break through from him, while Bai Shan and Daji guarded the middle and the other corner, firmly blocking Kyosai's generals. The Kyosai people were dying of anger. If they hadn't fought together, they would have almost ordered to shoot arrows directly. However, more and more people came to help, and the pressure on those in front of him became more and more serious. A soldier on Daji's side was slashed on the arm, and when the knife in his hand fell, a knife went straight to his neck. Daji raised the knife to block him, and the person facing Daji took the big knife and slashed at him. Manbao happened to stab someone back with a gun, and when he glanced at it, the long gun in his hand stabbed out diagonally. Bai Shan raised his foot and kicked the person out, shouting, "Close up again." So the soldiers and guards closed the distance between each other again, and squeezed the wounded and hors de combat into the protective circle. At this time, Urge and the others finally pushed open the two door latches, and they were pulling the door to both sides with force. Just opened a crack, and they heard the screams of killing outside. Bai Shan looked up at the opening of the city tower with a bloody face, only to realize that there were no soldiers who came down to support him. Obviously, their people were also rushing to kill outside. Bai Shan said, "The army is here, everyone hold on." The city gate made a heavy squeak and slowly opened. General Ashina squinted to see it, and immediately commanded the forward, "Rush into the city, there are our people inside." Kyosabing was furious and shouted, "Kill them." The Kyosai soldiers who were still fighting at the city gate saw the army outside, and they were even more angry, and they rolled towards them more bravely. Even Jin Kuyan couldn't stop it, let alone the others. Everyone retreated again and again, but it would only be more dangerous for them to walk out of the city gate. The arrows upstairs could shoot them into hedgehogs. While blocking, Bai Shan said loudly, "Surrender and don't kill. You were once soldiers and people of the great Jin dynasty. The army only targets the chaotic king of Kyosai, disarm and don't kill." Manbao and everyone shouted loudly to disarm and not kill. There were only 20 people, but they shouted out a posture of 200 people. Kyosabing was angry, but more people had their heads cold, as if they were sobered up by pouring a bucket of ice water on their heads. Just at this moment, the forwards of the army finally arrived, and they rushed over in the rain of arrows on the tower. Everyone's expressions changed when they heard the rumbling sound of horses' hooves. Bai Shan kicked away the Kyosai soldiers who were unwilling to give in, and cursed, "Don't run." After saying that, he turned around and pulled Manbao to hide at the door. The horses rubbed his side and flew in, and then countless horses ran past him. In the end, the Kyosai soldiers who could not escape were either cut down by the cavalry or kicked by the horses. When a cavalryman ran past him, Jin Kuyan's eyes flashed darkly, he stretched out his hand to drag the man down, seized the horse and followed the army into the city. The soldier who was dragged down was dumbfounded, and then yelled angrily, "Grandma, a bear, I didn't cut you because you were wearing the armor of Dajin. The son of a turtle, even robbed my horse." Hearing that, Bai Shan glanced back at him, he pointed at Ranma on the side and said, "Don't get on the horse and chase after him." The battle between the two armies was temporarily concentrated here at the West City Gate, but many Kyosai soldiers had already laid down their weapons and surrendered, and apparently they were going to the palace soon. The army behind will soon catch up. When he is found behind as a striker, he will definitely be charged after the incident. The face of the other party changed, and there was no time to thank him, so he ran to grab an empty horse and ran after him, and also joined the battle. The army crossed the border like locusts, and in the end only a group of soldiers was left to guard the west gate and the surrendered Kyosai soldiers, and the others all attacked the city. Man Bao looked left and right, and simply rolled up his sleeves to deal with the wounded soldiers. See you at 9. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2330. There is nothing else here, Man Bao can only simply bandage them to stop the bleeding. The forward took down the city gate, and General Ashina brought the army in. He stopped when he saw them. He looked up and down at Bai Shan and Zhou Man, and couldn't help but praise, "Good son. Man Bao." General Ashina also noticed it and said with a smile, "Master Zhou is also good." As soon as the city gates opened, the siege speed was much faster, but there were still Turkic soldiers in the city. General Ashina smiled and said, "It doesn't matter." He invited the two of them to accompany him. After all, staying at the city gate was still a little dangerous. Bai Shan thought for a while, and then blew his whistle, and Thief Li and Chi Ji ran out of the door, kicking and stomping away, and ran up to the two of them and squeezed them with their heads. Bai Shan stroked their horses' heads and said with a smile, "You guys are clever." The group followed General Ashina away. Unlike General Guo, unless he really needed General Ashina to rush to the front, he would stay behind and deal with it only according to the information returned by the soldiers. People and horses, the others headed towards the other three city gates and the royal city. General Ashina said, "Let the people guarding the south city gate make an opening, and let those who want to go out, don't stop them." General Ashina directly occupied a restaurant in the city as a military tent. Bai Shan and Man Bao sat on the side and watched him receive one message after another, and then passed on the orders one by one. "General, the North City Gate has been taken, and General Meng Xiao led his army in. Let them go to the palace to support, and be sure to take down King Kyosai." Then someone came to report where the remnants of Kyosai and the Turks had retreated. General Ashina said in one sentence, "If you can take it, take it. If you can't take it, let them go." "General, the palace has been captured." General Ashina nodded and asked, "Has King Kyosai captured it?" "Yes, take it." General Ashina got up and said to Bai Shanzhou, "You two, let's move to the palace." When Manbao and the others arrived at the palace, another order came to report to General, "The Turkic army has withdrawn from the south gate with the remnants of Kyosai." "Go chase," General Ashina said, "slow chase, just bite them from behind, don't rush them away." After it was washed away, the ambush left on the road was of little use, but he wanted to take everyone down. General Ashina looked back at Bai Shan, smiled and asked, "Master Bai has something to ask." The general left an ambush on the road. "That's right," General Ashina said, "I thought it might not be available today, but I didn't expect it to be so smooth, but I gave them food and grass for several days." He looked at Bai Shan approvingly and said, "General Li said that young Master Bai is willing to risk entering the city to delay time, and he can cooperate with us inside and outside. I thought that young Master Bai could save his own life in the city, but it was already very powerful, but I didn't expect to be able to open the gate. In this siege, young Master Bai and Lord Zhou take the lead." Bai Shan smiled and said, "It's because the soldiers accompanying him are brave, otherwise Shan's three-legged cat won't be able to open the city gate no matter how strategic he is. The city gate is not easy to open, not to mention the weight of the latch, just say that the gate cannot be opened by one person at all. Generally, 3 people on one side will open the door." General Ashina said, "They are all warriors. It's a credit to everyone except them. But the credit is also big and small." Jing Kuyan, who had already followed the striker into the palace, obviously deserved a lot of credit, but he was a little bit unlucky. King Kyosai was not caught by him, but by the soldier who was dragged off his horse. At that time, King Kyosai and his concubines hid under the dry well. The soldier passed by the dry well cursingly and threw a stone into it. The stone hit people, and the people below screamed. "No, someone below." So he found his comrades and pulled them up. When General Ashina arrived at the main hall, King Kyosai and his concubines were being tied up and thrown in the center of the main hall. With a wave of General Ashina's hand, the soldiers directly untied the female relatives and drove them out, leaving only King Kyosai in the hall. When King Kyosai saw Bai Shan and Zhou Man who followed up, he was furious. "Han people really don't have credibility, you lied to me." Bai Shan. How does this make him answer? He hesitated. "Excuse me." General Ashina couldn't help but look sideways. It is common for people to cheat on the battlefield. He is an enemy, why do you want to apologize to him? He said, "It's obviously that he is not as smart as others." King Kyosai was furious. However, General Ashina walked to the throne and sat down, sneering, "Not only is it stupid, but also has no virtue. Otherwise, how could your city be destroyed in one attack?" King Kyosai, so angry. General Ashina said, "You call me a minister of Dajin, and the summer is still like a newly married. As soon as winter begins, when I hear that my Dajin is in trouble, you will abandon it like a shoe. If you are unwilling, don't blame me Dajin for being ruthless, tortoise. Your Majesty, you are rude to me, disrespectful to your Majesty, and harboring evil intentions. Do you recognize this matter?" Whether he recognizes it or not, the kingdom is broken, so what's the point of talking about it? It is still interesting that General Ashina announced that he had abolished the king of Kyosai when the soldiers pressed the ministers of Kyosai. Unlike General Guo, he still thinks about the money in the king's city, so he handles things quickly, and the army directly takes over all the yamen in the king's city. Those who are willing to surrender are left to observe, and just tell them to go to work. Those who are unwilling to surrender are temporarily thrown into the heavenly prison to accompany King Kyosai, and will be dealt with after the war is over. Seeing that General Ashina was busy, Bai Shan simply stretched out his hand and pulled Man Bao back out. Bai Erlang and Lu Huan rushed into the palace with Zhou Liru, and when they saw them standing on the high steps holding hands, they immediately shouted, "Bai Shan! Zhou Man!" The two of them turned their heads and were startled when they saw the three people under the steps. They immediately ran down the steps. The three people below also ran up. The five of them converged in the middle. "No, this is someone else's blood, why are you here?" "I'm a military doctor. I said that I wanted to come in and treat the wounded soldiers nearby. General Meng let us follow." Bai Erlang looked at them up and down, and exclaimed, "Are you all covered in blood? Why is there so much blood on your body?" Bai Shan said helplessly, "Jing Kuyan slashed someone next to me, and all the blood was sprayed on me." He said, "It's so dangerous, why are you here?" "What's the danger? We're the last ones. When they attacked the city, we watched from a distance. We waited until the city gate was taken down and all our people took over before we entered the city. The military doctors and them are you treating people at the city gate?" Bai Erlang said with trepidation. "They all said that someone opened the city gate at the west city gate, and the people who should be with them are afraid that they will die under the chaos of the army. I am worried. I went to the north city gate first, and I heard that you followed General Ashina, so I came here all the way." Lu Huan also said, "Apart from the Turkic troops who fled abroad, everyone else was quite honest. As soon as the troops ran past, they all squatted and surrendered. The people of Kyosai King City have done this once, and it's not too long now, and they will have the experience to do it again. General Ashina has basically controlled the King City before sunset. See you tomorrow." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2331. Bai Erlang chatted beside Bai Shan and Zhou Man, and after he finished speaking, he looked around curiously. This is the Kyosai Palace, the steps are a little more and higher, and it looks very ordinary. Bai Shandao, of course it can't compare to our palace, but it's still luxurious. Look at the shops and houses in the city. That's right. Bai Erlang looked around curiously, and when he saw the soldiers driving the people from the palace to a side hall, he couldn't help asking, what should we do with these people? Bai Shan glanced at it and said, General Ashina is not a murderer. Most of the palace staff will let it go. As for those ministers, it depends on the situation. But it also depends on how General Ashina plans to deal with Kyosai. General Ashina was also thinking about this issue. Originally, he wanted to sweep the past all the way, no matter what Yankai, Kyosai, Shul, and Khotan he was. He took all those who lost to the Jin dynasty, and he had Guo Xiao behind him. The protector of Angzi came to finish off, and then all these small countries would be included in Angzi. The place is not very big anyway. As a result, Guo Xiao actually killed himself, and his morale took a big hit. Now that the western regions has entered winter, the weather will become colder and colder soon, and there may be heavy snowfall. This kind of weather is not conducive to the soldiers fighting at all. And if you leave it for next year's ice and snow, at least until April. If the timeline is stretched too long, it will have a great impact on the national treasury. Not only the Ministry of Households, but also His Majesty will not be very happy. The loss is too large, which is not worth the loss for Dejin. Therefore, the previous plan obviously did not work, and it would take at least 2 months to take over the Kyosai kingdom and straighten it out. Originally, if Guo Xiao was here, this kind of thing could be handed over to him. After all, he was the protector of Angzi, and he, the chief general, only needed to lead the troops in front to lay down the territory. General Ashina rubbed his forehead, and immediately said, Re-establish King Kyosai, you capture all the brothers and relatives of King Kyosai, and I will pick one to succeed King Kyosai. The confidant should immediately go down and arrest people. It was getting dark. Bai Shan and the others stayed in the palace temporarily. When General Meng found out that they lived here, he immediately sent the wounded soldiers here. Medic. As soon as he arrived, he immediately called out to Zhou Liruo, little lady is so unpromising, you clearly said to go for a while, but you never returned. Do you know how many injured people were sent to me? Seeing Zhou Man standing next to him, he complained even more, Master Zhou, you are an imperial physician, this kind of charge is the business of the soldiers, and the conspiracy is the business of the civil servants, our doctor is here. It's enough to rule people later, how could you take such a risk? Man Bao said, I am also a civil servant. She emphasized, I am still compiled by Chongquen Museum. The military doctor choked. Bai Shan thoughtfully found the steps for him, all the injured people in the army have been sent to the side hall. I went to ask a group of people to boil water. Let's start treating the injured now. It's going to be another sleepless night tonight. The military doctor nodded again and again, seeing that Bai Shan and Zhou Man were covered in water vapor, and their hair was still a little wet, so he secretly said, why are you still taking a shower, are you planning to wash up and sleep? The things in the palace are much more complete than those in their tent. Originally, it was almost searched by the soldiers, and the soldiers had thick hands and could not help but drop things when they were rummaging. Bai Shan sent someone to pass the message in advance, and the wounded soldiers would be sent over in a while, so the medicinal materials in the warehouse and the items in the kitchen should not be damaged. So the soldiers lightened their hands, and the medicinal materials they found were sent to the side hall together, and the things in the kitchen were basically untouched. Bai Shan went to the side hall to select a lot of palace servants, all of them with calluses on their hands, who often did rough work in the kitchen and the outside yard, and asked them to fetch and boil water to deliver water. Dealing with wounded soldiers requires a lot of hot water. So when General Ashina finally came out of the meeting with the generals in the army, when he looked up, he saw that someone was carrying wounded soldiers to the side hall. The lights are brightest. There is. General Meng immediately replied, return to the chief, Imperial Physician Zhou and others are there to deal with the wounded. General Ashina was surprised, Master Zhou is willing to do such rough work. In his impression, the imperial physicians of the Tai hospital are proud, and it is not difficult for the elites in Beijing to invite them. After all, it is also one of the duties of the Tai hospital to treat the dignitaries. But it is difficult for officials below the fourth rank to hire an imperial physician, let alone these soldiers. In the end, military doctors are cheap, and generally no one wants to do them. Little General Meng was still young and didn't know the sinister worldly world, so he answered bluntly, yes, the soldiers in our army were also seen by Imperial Physician Zhou before. And how could this be rough work? Is it rough work to sew his belly? Thinking of his stomach, General Meng felt a little pain in his stomach, as if the wound had opened. It seemed that he would have to go to Zhou Man to deal with the wound in a while. General Ashina stood and thought for a while, thinking that there were Bai Shan, his future niece-in-law, and the grandson of the minister of the household in it. He turned around and said, let's go, and have a look. Bai Shan beat Man Bao and said to her, if General Ashina re-establishes King Kaiosai, then we should be able to go back soon. Man Bao asked, don't fight anymore. Bai Shan said, General Guo's death will affect his morale, and Angzi also needs a new protector. It will take a long time to come and go, and there is no person like General Guo in the rear, and General Ashina is afraid that he will not agree. Let go and conquer these small countries. What if you lose 2 cities and then lose another city? Without the appointment of the imperial court, it is impossible for the Angzi army to obey. After the beginning of the spring, the most important thing for the Ministry of Household is the Central Plains. On the western side, it is already very good that they are willing to give food and grass to fight. It was also the capriciousness of several small states in Kaiosai that provoked the imperial court, and they fell into trouble when the Great Jin was in trouble. What Bai Shan did not say is that although today is the time of prosperous and powerful, the crown prince is not too young. In 10 or 8 years, he may have to consider the matter of succession. The affairs of an emperor were turbulent, and the western regions were chaotic and eastward, which was a great harm to the country. It is better to beat them when they have spare strength, so that they will not dare to reach out easily in the future. Man Bao counted the time, then can we go back to celebrate the new year? See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2332. After thinking about it, Bai Shan said, it may be a little difficult, but if General Ashina returns in October or November, we should be able to return to Xiaoshu. Man Bao became happy, it's not bad to spend the new year with Brother Yang. Bai Shan smiled and was about to speak when he saw a shadow cast over his head. He looked up and saw General Ashina with a group of people standing beside the two of them. Bai Shan got up quickly, General Ashina. After General Ashina suppressed him, he smiled and said, don't be too polite, you guys will heal the wounds first. Man Bao was sewing wounds for the wounded soldier, so he didn't stand up to salute, but nodded slightly to him as a greeting. General Ashina smiled and nodded to her, watching her treat her wounds with a very fast speed. Even Bai Shan, who helped her, was very skilled. General Ashina's eyes showed approval, and after they were busy for a while, they called Bai Shan out to speak. The reason why I didn't call Zhou Man was because a wounded soldier with a slash in the stomach was sent to the east gate, and his intestines came out. She immediately cleaned her hands and went to someone to deal with it. The military doctor rushed to Zhou Man before Zhou Liru to beat her up. Zhou Liru could only continue to deal with other injuries with regret. General Ashina saw that she had cut off a section of her intestines, sewed it up, and then slowly stuffed it back into her stomach, and immediately looked away. Bai Shan followed him out. General Ashina stood in the yard, Looking at the wounded being carried in and out constantly, he exhaled, turned his head and smiled at Bai Shan. You are right, the battle line is too long and the time drags on for too long, right? My Jin dynasty is not good, so I decided to establish another king of Kyosai, but instead of setting up the queen of Kyosai to return to the court, I also plan to go to Shulkota and the West Turks for a walk. But this time, it's obviously not the original victory, but the shock, so General Ashina asked Bai Shan, would you like to walk with me and make some achievements on the battlefield? Bai Shan was surprised, me? General Ashina smiled and said, you are the first to attack the Kyosai King city this time, not to mention that you are either white or white. With this credit, you can join the military staff as well. Bai Shan couldn't help but ask, can Lord Zhou go too? General Ashina was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, why, young Master Bai can't bear his fiancée even for a day. Bai Shan smiled embarrassedly, we are used to being together. Man Bao was very excited about the wounded soldiers in the army before. Although she has seen 3 waves of wounded soldiers, she said that the doctor must be familiar with it, and the more patients she encounters, the better. Regardless of the fact that most people's injuries are similar, and the treatment methods are generally the same, there are always some differences in the things that need to be paid attention to during the treatment process, because each individual's situation is different. Among these many subtle differences, there will always be individual huge differences. That kind of special situation may not be recorded in medical books, and it depends entirely on the doctor's on-the-spot performance. Some doctors may never encounter a case in their lifetime, and Man Bao wanted more insight. General Ashina agreed after a little thought. Zhou Man was different from other women, and her usefulness in the army was not small. He said how many wounded soldiers in the Manbayan palace could survive because of her. So Bai Shan gave his friends a chance to join the army. It's just that Bai Erlang and Lu Huan didn't really want this opportunity, so they were stunned. Didn't we come to see General Ashina? Bai Shan just remembered this, turned his head and said to the drowsy Man Bao, yes, you haven't seen General Ashina yet. It was almost dawn now, and Man Bao almost dealt with the injuries all night. Hearing this, he forced his eyes open and said, is General Ashina ill? General Ashina was really sick. When Man Bao woke up and was about to see the wounded soldiers, General Ashina's personal soldiers came to invite Zhou Man to see the general. He said, the general has been going to the toilet a lot during this time. Although he has been getting better recently, he still needs 2 or 3 times a day. He drank a little wine with the soldiers last night, and he had diarrhea again this morning. Man Bao, do you still drink alcohol when you have diarrhea? Why don't you just eat crotons? The soldiers wondered, do I need to eat croton for diarrhea? Man Bao. She didn't want to talk to him very much, but she was afraid that he would really think that he had to eat croton for diarrhea, so she could only say, you can't eat croton for diarrhea, and you can't drink alcohol. But the general is not accustomed to the soil and water. The prescription prescribed by the military doctor before was to serve alcohol. Man Bao thought about it for a while, and there really is a prescription for acclimatization that is given with alcohol, but since there is diarrhea, this prescription should not be prescribed. Man Bao went to see General Ashina. She looked at his face, and found that there was nothing wrong with the sallow yellow, so she looked at his tongue coating, and then went to feel his pulse and asked, what does the general think? Are you uncomfortable? General Ashina recalled that, however, he did not remember the personal soldiers carefully, so the personal soldiers usually answered. Man Bao asked very detailed, down to how he ate and dressed the day before the diarrhea started, but he felt cold or hot, and even asked if he was in a good mood. General Ashina, do I need to ask so many questions to see a doctor? His military doctor obviously felt his pulse and said that he was not accustomed to the environment. After reading it, Man Bao gave him a prescription. In addition to the medicine prescription, there were also dietary prescriptions. She said, "You have stomach problems, so I will prescribe a prescription for you. Take it for 3 days first. Note, it just so happens that you can do both in the city now." Man Bao handed the recipe to the soldier, who barely recognized a few words, so his eyes widened and his scalp was a little numb. General Ashina asked, "What's wrong?" He took the prescription and looked at it, and Man Bao had already said, "You can't drink alcohol these days, you should eat less meat, it's better not to eat it, the maximum amount of meat you can eat every day is written on it, and you can't eat grilled meat and big meat. Pieces of meat, you can only eat minced meat at most." "General Ashina, am I not acclimatized?" Man Bao said, "You are not satisfied with your diet, you can say that you are not satisfied with the soil and water. After all, the diet here in the western regions is very different from that in the central plains." "General Ashina, it's quite different from the central plains, but it's not much different from the grasslands. He used to be the prince of the Eastern Turks, so he grew up on the grasslands. It was rare to be able to eat the naan and roast lamb that he remembered. He still felt very kind, but it turned out that it was because of this diarrhea." Man Bao said euphemistically, "General, people's stomach is different in every period, and your stomach is different now than when you were young." "General Ashina, is he very old now?" After Man Bao prescribed the medicine, he left and went to the side hall to see the wounded soldiers. The personal soldiers took the prescription and looked at General Ashina. "General." General Ashina waved, "Forget it, let's go. To fight, a good body is a must, and he can temporarily endure this little appetite. See you at 9. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2333. When the army returned, General Guo, who had been hiding in the medical tent in the camp, was finally carried out. General Ashina glanced at it and sighed, "Take it away." General Guo Xiao was also helped out of the hospital account, and he knew that his father was killed at that time. Although there have been quarrels between father and son, General Guo Xiaojun is still very sad at this moment, and tears are falling. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang stood beside him, patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't be sad, fortunately, the royal city has been retaken. Otherwise that would be a great sin." Bai Erlang nodded again and again. Seeing that his face was pale from crying, Bai Shan seemed to feel uncomfortable covering his chest, so he quickly supported him and said, "Don't be sad, our blood is still flowing in your body. You have a blood transfusion." Bai Erlang immediately shuddered when he thought of the blood he had drawn. "No, I think he is much better." Lu Huan was a little worried. "Let Zhou Man show him, if something really happened, wouldn't our blood be wasted?" General Guo Xiao listened to them chattering in his ears, and suddenly he was not so sad. He wiped his tears, glanced at his father lying on the wooden board again, and sniffed, "I'm fine." General Ashina assigned some people to transport General Guo's body back to Zizhu, and at the same time escorted General Guo and a group of wounded soldiers back first. He said, "When your wounds are better, set off. Be sure to stabilize Zizhu." As for Kaiosai's side, General Ashina has chosen one of the relatives of King Kaiosai to inherit the throne of King Kaiosai. He was the cousin of King Kaiosai, called Yehu. He was brought out of the prison. As soon as General Ashina said he was going to be made king, he immediately took the initiative and killed King Kaiosai. So General Ashina gathered all the people of the Kaiosai King city together, declared that he wanted to hang the people and punish the crime, and directly announced the crime of the Kaiosai King to the world. At the same time, news of the remnants of the soldiers who had escaped from the South City Gate and the ambushes of the Turkic troops also came back to the royal city, and more than 800 soldiers were captured. When the army escorted these people into the city, the king's city was shaken. Yehu, who had just become the king of Kyosai, was more honest. After discussing with the noble officials of the royal city, he simply gathered a batch of food and grass for them, and also gave them many precious gifts. The 2 boxes of gold and silver jewelry that Bai Shan and the others carried into the palace went around and returned to General Ashina's hands. General Ashina received the gold and silver jewelry as the spoils of war, and even registered them. When they go back, these things will be handed over to the national treasury. And he, who was already in the pocket of General Li, didn't ask, and he didn't comment on Bai Shan and the others who distributed most of the spoils to the soldiers. In his opinion, the distribution of the spoils this time is different from the previous time when Hoji, Guo Xiao and others hid the spoils. In order to boost morale, these are acceptable. The Angzi soldiers who had divided a lot of gold and silver saw that the chief executive had no intention of pursuing them, so they quietly breathed a sigh of relief, and hid the good things they had allocated more secretly. For those who have been killed, their belongings will be jointly managed by their comrades, and when they go back, they will find an opportunity to send them home. Anyone can die in battle. These are all things that everyone discussed early in the morning. Let's not talk about it, but no one dares to swallow the private feelings of the comrades. General Li waited for 2 days and found that General Ashina really had no intention of pursuing them, so he brought 5 boxes to them. He stuffed them with the boxes, and said with a smile, "Master Zhou, Master Bai, this is for you." Of things were divided after Bai Shan and the others left. After all, it was not to boost morale. At that time, General Li specially reserved some for Bai Shan and the others. It was the most dangerous thing for them to enter the royal city as an internist. Naturally, they had to give some spoils of war when they died, and even more so when they were alive. This time they were the first to attack the city, and their identities are not simple. After returning to Beijing, they will definitely have a bright future. No one can miss them without this little thing. Seeing these things, Bai Shan hesitated before accepting them. Everyone opened it to see that Man Bao and Zhou Liru were both a box of jewelry, not to mention, they were pretty good looking. Bai Erlang also looked at it happily, and took out a jade horse. Don't say, the things in the palace are not bad. Bai Shan also looked at it carefully, and after appreciating it, he asked Daji to bring a bigger box and poured the things into it. He looked at a few people and motioned for them to pour in. Lu Huan fell into it, and Man Bao quickly said, "You should be lighter, what if it breaks?" After speaking, he felt distressed and put it in the same way. Bai Erlang was also very reluctant. "I really don't take it." Bai Shan patted his hand and put everything in the box into the box. He said, "If we want to earn it ourselves, don't take anything that shouldn't be taken." Zhou Liru was the most reluctant to give up. He touched the box and asked, "Little ant, why can everyone else take it, but we can't?" Man Bao said, "We are different from them, they." Man Bao paused and then said, "Their army's salaries are insufficient, and food and forage are occasionally deducted. Because of the default rules in the general environment, the armament given to them by the Ministry of Household is always insufficient, so their food and clothing basically depends on the general ability and conscience. The Angzi army is not bad and has trophies, but General Guo seldom gives it to the people below, so the Angzi army is very poor. They have no regrets for these things, but we can't." After saying this, Man Bao no longer felt distressed when he put the things in his hands into the box. She said, "And our identities can't steal the spoils. Look at Hoji, he was fighting with the prince to the point of endless death. Isn't it because he stole a lot of gold and silver treasure seized from Jiao Kang? Man Baodao, don't look at this as a customary rule, but there must be restraint. Guo Xiao is just because he has no restraint, so His Majesty does not like him. Although he has been used all the time, he has never been named a marquis. The General Meng of Yumenguan is still below him in official position, but he has already been named a marquis. From the point of view of military merit alone, Guo Xiao's military merit is not inferior to him, the only difference is the military heart. It is also illegal when something that is customary becomes the secular. As soon as Zhou Liru thought of Hoji's fate, he immediately put the things in and nodded again and again, "You are right, little ant." Man Bao smiled and said, "I'm not a stingy person today. General Ashina is even more modest. When we return to the capital, His Majesty will definitely reward us." Bai Shan also nodded, "Isn't the royal gift more glorious?" So Daji quietly sent things to General Ashina, and asked him to record it in the book, so he didn't have to announce it to the army, so as not to disturb the Angzi army who had already divided the spoils. General Ashina also sympathized with the poverty of the Angzi army. If they were poor and weak, it would be fine, but they were poor and strong, and they never risked their lives to fight on the battlefield. When I went out, I couldn't help but said to the people around me, as expected of a famous young talent in Beijing, His Majesty really did not see the wrong person. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2334. General Guo reluctantly got up to send Bai Shan and the others. He glanced at the army that had already left for a long time, and then looked back at General Meng, Bai Shan, and the others, and said solemnly, "Take care of you." Bai Erlang also happily said, "You also take care." Bai Shan nodded calmly, "We're not here, the military doctor may not be able to help you with blood transfusion. General Guo, you should set off." General Meng just reached out and patted him on the shoulder, then mounted his horse and looked at Bai Shan and the others. Man Bao also rode on the horse and tightened his cloak. The weather was getting colder and colder when riding on the horse. Although the weather turned cold, General Ashina did not plan to stay in Kyosai for a few more days. On the third day after the city-wide meeting was held, he would reorganize his troops and go directly to the place where the Turks had retreated, attacking 2 troops along the way. Dozens of small towns. It's really small, the size of a town, but it's so vast and sparsely populated that such a place is also a city. This time, he didn't think about subduing the people, so he was much faster. He almost captured the city, gathered food and grass, and left. He only stayed at the important gates, and the rest followed the army. The Western Turks were shocked, and the Shul kingdom, who had only escaped the catastrophe, was also shocked, and immediately reinforced the border towns. There was a rebellion in Shul, and a new king was directly changed inside, and then he put down a form to General Ashina, confessed his guilt, and sent gold, silver, forage, and beautiful women. General Ashina gave the beauties to his subordinates, kept the food and grass for his own use, and sent the gold and silver registers back to the treasury, and then took the people to Khotan. From Shul to Khotan, you can walk along the Tuduo River, which is much closer than Kusai to Khotan, and the distance between the middle desert is only 2 days. When the king of Khotan heard that the army was coming to Khotan, he was so anxious that he burst into tears. If he knew earlier, he would not listen to the rumors and followed the Kyosai and the Western Turks. Grandma, who the hell said that the gods punished the emperor of the Central Plains and made him infected with smallpox? Does this look like a smallpox? The king of Khotan did not dare to neglect, and even ignored the dispute with Tubo, and immediately prepared a batch of food, grass, gold, and silver jewelry to send to Ashina's army tent. Man Bao watched the soldiers who were sick today in the hospital tent, checked some wounded soldiers, washed his hands with warm water, and held his cloak tightly before going out to watch the fun. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang were standing there watching the excitement. Man Bao leaned over, looked at it for a while and asked, "Does General Ashina still go to Khotan?" Bai Shan said, "Definitely go." Bai Erlang, "I've already received money and food from others." "So what?" Bai Shan said, "I always have to meet the king of Khotan in person." He should have thought of this when he was making waves with others. He said, "Because of them, the trade routes in the western regions have been cut off for a year. Originally, when the smallpox epidemic in Zhizhou was over, the trade routes should slowly recover. It was because they kept spreading bad remarks about Dajin and indulging their soldiers to loot the passing merchants, which caused the trade routes to be cut off. He even spoke rudely to Dajin and His Majesty, which greatly damaged the image of Dajin and His Majesty. General Ashina did decide to go to Khotan, so he accepted what he sent, but after receiving it, he still pulled out and went to Khotan. After hearing about it, the king of Khotan slept for a night, finally got up and drafted a confession. Then he took someone to the border with a sad face, and met General Ashina's army at the border. General Ashina glanced at the rations, gold and silver that he sent again, snorted coldly, and looked at the confession letter sent to him. He thought about it for a while, then glanced at the clouds in the air. It was so dark that he couldn't see the sun. When he saw it, he said thoughtfully, "General, it seems that it is about to snow." General Ashina pressed the confession and asked, "Are the soldiers' winter clothes okay?" The confidant paused and said, "It's still a little thin, there are still some soldiers from the south in the army, and they are very uncomfortable. Recently, the medical bills reported that there are more soldiers who are sick." General Ashina tapped the confession under his palm, and finally snorted and said, "Please come in and meet the king of Khotan." The confidant bowed away. So far, after Yankai was incorporated into Angzi and lost the royal family, Kyosai and Shul exchanged a king, and after the Western Turks lost 2 warriors and land of 12 cities, the king of Khotan temporarily relied on the confession he sent out, and food, grass, gold, and silver kept the throne and the city. He once again became a minister to the Jin dynasty, and he found many treasures from the treasury of the palace and handed them over to General Ashina, who asked him to bring them back to the capital to pay tribute to the emperor. Of course, he also sent a team of messengers to go back with General Ashina, and he sincerely asked the messengers to go to the capital to plead guilty again. General Ashina was very satisfied with his knowledge, so he took the things and left with someone. Manbao and the others have learned a lot along the way. If the king of Khotan didn't react too much, they might even enter the royal city of Khotan to take a look. They regretfully followed General Ashina back, and discussed, "I heard that after Khotan, it is Tubo and Dabolu, and after Dabolu, it is Tianzhu, and what Masters Hiran wants to go to is Tianzhu." Bai Shan regretted again, "Unfortunately, Masters Hiran and the others did not follow the army. Otherwise, they would go with them and meet the king of Khotan. Maybe the king of Khotan could help him cross Dabolu to Tianzhu." "Bai Erlang, didn't you hear that Dabolu was fighting with Xiaobolu? They beat them, but it doesn't affect the great Broly to win over the king of Khotan." Manbao raised his eyes and looked ahead, a little excited. "Are we going to go to this big desert?" Bai Shan nodded, "Let's take the Chai River and go directly across the desert back to Kyosai. The speed is half faster than the detour to Shul. From here to Kyosai, it is basically a desert, but there is an intermittent river in the desert called Chai River. With this river there is an oasis along the way, and they were sent by Shul and Khotan. Grain, basically don't have to worry about eating and drinking. The march of a large army is different from that of Bai Shan and the others. 20,000 people go in and out at the same time. Basically, as long as they don't encounter a storm and don't get lost, they are nothing to be afraid of in the desert. Even the animals will go early. Dodge. Manbao felt that when he slept in the open at night, he felt peaceful between heaven and earth, as if they were the only people under the entire sky. When General Ashina heard their sighs, he said, "It's cold, scorpions and mice are all hidden, and when it's hot, let alone an army of 20,000, even if an army of 100,000 passes by, they will also be able to rustling. So there is no need to feel that way. A few people in full treasure." General Ashina didn't find it, and asked them directly, "I want to return to the DPRK as soon as possible. After I return to Zizhu, will you come back to Beijing with me?" Bai Shan couldn't help but ask, "What about Zizhu?" If the army leaves, what will happen to the Kyosai countries again? See you at 6 p.m.